Welcome to Alan J. Fisher's channel, author of the Empyraeum Cycle and of the Chronicles of Enoch. Today I would, once I can get this angle right, like to, share with you another excerpt, another story from the Empyraeum Collections Anthology by me, currently available in all your usual places and outlets. You can get it everywhere, in ebook or actual hardback or paperback format, as this one here is my own personal reading copy, which will be worth millions one day, I tell you. You know that I'm going to be taking off and being famous. You people will be the first, and there'll be people fighting their granny for a copy of this book. They will, honest. I know they will. They'll be fighting their granny, their dog, their cat, and all the kittens, and everything. Today I would like to read to you another story of mine which I have a great love for. This is actually a story I wrote a long time ago, wrote it down, lost what I'd written down, and wrote it again. Starting with a very simple principle, and I hope you'll understand this to me. It's based on the idea of a clock, to some degree. And it's strange. This does take place on a colony world, somewhere within the fractured Empyreum, somewhere where one of the colonists from the famous ark sent out by Lupernicus crashed, and strange stuff happened. Let's hear about this, shall we? Called the 13th Watch. A hilltop at the centre of the town. Upon its table flat peak. Let me start again. I'm having trouble tying my tongue here. A hilltop at the centre of the town. Upon its table flat peak were equally arranged 12 chairs. Upon each chair sat a god. With exact regularity 24 times a day, the gods would rise, turn to their right, and bow to the next god. Then each god would step to the right, bow to the chair in the centre of the circle, and sit in the next chair along. Stand, turn, bow, step, bow, sit. Regular, even, predictable, and unchanging. Stand, turn, bow, step, bow, sit. Stand, turn, bow, step, bow, sit. Stand, turn, bow, step, bow, sit. So passed the day. So passed the night. 12 times round. Stand, turn, bow, step, bow, sit. So passed the night. 12 times. Stand, turn, bow, step, bow, sit. 24 times a day without fail, without variance, without delay. Stand, turn, bow, step, bow, sit. 24 flights of wide stone steps wound up the hill from the town below. 24 turns of 60 steps each. The hill was tall, but you could always see at least one god stand, turn, bow, step, bow, sit in their regularity, for the gods were large and wore robes of deep, bright red. Wherever one stood in the town, one could see at least one god stand, turn, bow, step, bow, sit when the time came, so you could know to lay down whatever you were doing and leave it, for the time for that task had passed, and it was time for the next task. Before the gods had come, this town was a different place. It was sung that the world had fallen into darkness and disaster, that almost all the people on it had fallen to savagery and war. A great chaos and great war had left few people remaining. It was told that the survivors of the chaos had found their way here and built this town, thinking themselves safe, but monsters had come. Demons and twisted men to take what little they had remaining. They had fought, defended, and hidden here in the dark. The people of the town knew nothing of the outside world, though. They lived in their valley and lived by their hill and their gods. No one dared venture out into the wasteland beyond the walls of this green and fertile valley, for there was death, the elders said. There, no order, no gods were to be found. It was also told, not written. Writing took too long, and it was a wasteful activity when one man could speak to another man, one woman to another, and communicate their message, without first one having to compose their missive and take time. Then another receive it, read it, and compose their reply. What a wasteful foolishness. One could talk and tell tales of the other times while eating or relaxing at the end of the day's work before bed. No need for one to write down when one had a mouth. And there was no one outside this valley anyway. The people used to waste time and had no discipline. They would do nothing all day and pay attention to the passage of time. They had no gods, or not real ones. They could see at least. Or they would waste time spending all day on one activity and not pausing each time the gods stand, turn, bow, step, bow, sit, to leave their task for the ended turn and start the new with a new task. They were fat and they were lazy, and would then, after too long in their sloth, rush around like flies trying to get everything done in the turns which remained. Of course, they never got anything done, right? Therefore, into this disorder and constant stress and rushing, they were always angry and had wasteful wars, which ended their wasteful world. In addition, they, the darker stories told, are the ones who wait without in the darkness. It was said the gods came to the hill to protect the town and the refugees of the fallen wasteful world, although it was never said where they came from. No one seemed to care as long as they were there protecting. In their stand, turn, bow, step, bow, sit, rhythm. The gods never spoke, and no one seemed to know where the rules had come from, though everyone followed them because they worked. The rules were not written down anywhere. The gods never proclaimed them, for the gods never spoke, just repeated their stand, turn, bow, step, bow, sit, rhythm. And no one recalled ever being taught them. Everyone just knew. The best defense is order. The gods would stand, turn, bow, step, bow, sit. As the gods would stand, turn, bow, step, bow, sit. You start your task, and when they next stand, turn, bow, step, sit, you start your task. And when they next stand, turn, bow, step, bow, sit, you stop and begin your next task. If you did not complete your task in that turn of the gods, you waited until the same turn the next day to carry on with it. A full cycle was a 24 turns. So if someone were to order a table and was told it would take 3 cycles, they knew it would take 3 cycles to arrive, guaranteed. It was complex. And efficiency required steps. The system worked. The rules made sure no time was wasted, and made the people of the town very efficient at their daily tasks, because their lives, governed by their silent gods, were all about efficiency and good use of their time. It was considered right, and it was considered proper, not to waste more turns on a task if it could be avoided. It was wasteful, and everyone knew where wasteful led to. The town was quiet and industrious. Everyone knew their tasks, got on with their lives and followed the rules, and learned to specialise so well in their field so they could be efficient and do things right. No one rushed. That was wasteful and led to disorder, remember? Everyone made sure they did things right, because if you did it badly, that was wasteful, because you had to do it again in another turn. Not only did you waste one turn, but you wasted 2. This is what led to the world to fall, and order is the only protection from darkness. Therefore, everyone did their work well. Bakers baked and made sweet treats. Builders built. Housewives housewifed. Everything in its place. It was all ordered. It was all right. Stand, turn, bow, step, bow, sit, went the rhythm. Stand, turn, bow, step, bow, step, sit, start your task. Stand, turn, bow, step, bow, sit, end your task. At night, the sickly sun would set, but the townfolk would not stop. They would continue and with an instinct seemingly built in, turn their heads to watch the gods stand, turn, bow, step, bow, sit, before going indoors or home to eat. They would then follow their task until the last stand, turn, bow, step, bow, sit of the day signalled sleep. Of course, after the sun went down, one had to still see the gods stand, turn, bow, step, bow, sit, and for this 13 fires were lit on the hilltop. Children were chosen for this very important task, for the night has the most terrors, needs the greatest protection. All must see the gods when the darkness descends. As light failed, a child would arrive at the top step to wait. As the gods stand, turn, bow, step, bow, sit, he would enter the circle of their chairs and light each fire, leave fresh fuel and matches, and return to the top step. Counting in their head for a fraction of a turn, they descended one of the 60 steps. Count, step, count, step. As they reached the 60, stand, turn. As they reached the 60, stand, turn, bow, step, stand, bow, sit. Go the gods, and they count again. Count, step, 60 counts and 60 steps. And then stand, turn, bow, step, bow, sit. As they descend, as the sun rises, they will meet along the way she who is to light the flames for the next night. Count, step, stand, turn, bow, step, bow, sit. Up the child goes to light the night's fires. Down comes the child who lit them last. One ascending, one descending always. Count, step, 60 counts per flight. Stand, turn, bow, step, bow, sit for the next flight. 24 flights and 24 turns. The flames are always lit afresh each night, as the fuel was exhausted when the day dawned. This was important. The fires must never go out. There is a 13th chair inside the circle of 12. The figure in this chair does not stand, turn, bow, step, bow, sit. It does not move. It is silent, as are the other gods, but it looks like a statue. Only the wind moving its robe, a darker greyish brown, shows it is not of stone. No one knows who this is. It sits, this figure, always facing out, but as faceless in the deeply hooded robes as the gods are. The children who ascend to light the fire at its feet and leave fuel and matches beside its seat, but it acknowledges them not. A child has sometimes reported god number 11 nodded its hood at them, or god number 5 made a sound, but no one knows for sure. No one says anything about the 13th. The children whisper they're afraid of it. It feels colder where it sits, that they saw ice on its seat or at its feet. They say it is scary and they do not dare look into the emptiness of its cowl. No adults ascend to where the gods stand, turn, bow, step, sit. Bow, step. No adults ascend to where the gods stand, turn, bow, step, bow, sit. This is forbidden. No one knows by whom, for it is nowhere written, and the gods do not speak. They just stand, turn, bow, step, bow, sit. There are nights when the turns of darkness are longer, the air colder, the stars strange. That strange stories are told about. People hear things in darkness beyond the valley. Strange and frightening noises. Noises one cannot describe. No one knows what these noises are, for no one leaves the town, the valley and the hilltop. Many mutter they have no wish to know what the noises are. If it is not of the valley, then it cannot be good. Were it good, would not the valley and the gods welcome it inside? Then no refugees. No one from outside the valley had entered the valley in the time of any currently alive. Not the eldest of the eldest had heard of such a thing. What is outside the valley should remain there, they cry and mutter, shaking their grey heads. We do not want anything from outside in here. The outside is where everything went bad, before we had our gods, before we had order. One of these strange nights, the girl or boy who lit the fires at nightfall are sometimes heard to mutter, once they return down the steps the next night, of strange things above. The child who they meet on their way down, that child's way up, have spoken of how pale and afraid the descending child looks, how they have not met their eyes, extended no gesture of greeting. Speech is forbidden on the steps of the hilltop too. No one knows who forbids it, or why. It is simply in the rules. Among the children, for adults are quick to shove and reprimand a child who attempts to speak of their sacred duty, there is hush and whispered talk of strange things indeed on that darkest and longest of nights. Some, in hushed little groups, claim they saw the 13th move. The gods have done their rhythm of stand, turn, bow, step, bow, sit to signal work is ended. The mothers and fathers now preparing the night meal. The children, as children are wont, playing in the yard, talking in whispered voices, giggles or exclamations quickly hushed by the others. A group often sits behind the storage shed, a bold child with dark hair, pale skin and known for boisterous play. Occasionally occasioning a rebuke from an adult, holds his court. In an exaggerated whisper he tells them of his ascent and descent 2 cycles gone, for his duty fell upon the last long night. He had climbed count step, up the flights 60 steps, count step 60 more. It is such a long and far way. Thank the gods and mum and dad for the thick robes and the firelight. Count step, 60 more, on and on until the last count step. And the gods above made their last stand, turn, bow, step, bow, sit, as the boy entered the circle to fulfill his sacred duty. The gods were seated, unmoving and silent, the wind fluttering their robes, each facing outwards, hands, if hands there were inside those voluminous sleeves, on knees, or where the knees might be. The 13th more silent and still he seemed. The stone by his feet was cold, so cold as the wood was arranged in the metal bowl. The matches in his so cold as arranging the wood in the metal bowl at his feet, the matches shaking in his fingers would not light. A whiff of wind would keep catching them and extinguishing them from where he did not know. He was counting in his head, or trying to, but the numbers were getting muddled. He knew he had little time left. The fires must keep burning night after night, and especially on the night when the long dark came. The noises from beyond the valley never came close enough to see what was making them, but no one wished them to. They shuttered their windows, locked their doors tight, and tried to sleep, tried to block out and ignore the cacophony. This night it seemed louder than before, more intense, more excited. By his count, the gods were very close to their last stand, turn, bow, step, bow, sit, before he should leave and begin his descent. He had the fires of the 12 gods lit, but he could not get the 13th to catch. All around, the howls and the screams and the strange noise were getting worse and louder. He saw trees moving in a wind which was not there. Of course, all of this was not making his task any easier. Cold, numb fingers shaking. Strike the match, it flares. Whiff of wind, it goes out. The 12 gods sat on impassively and did nothing. They were not moving yet. All around the town, people wrapped themselves more firmly in blankets and tried not to look at the windows or even get out of bed. They must trust in the gods and not waste time. Worrying was a waste of time, the rules said. Though no one knew where or why it said that. But the rules were the rules, and the rules kept them safe, just like the gods did. The noises would go away. The day would come and none of this would worry anyone. It sounded awfully close and loud though. Cursing was not allowed or encouraged, the rules again. But no one was watching as the boys started to run out of both matches and time. The rules didn't count if no one is. The 13th was not looking outward impassively as he had been earlier. sleeves on his knees where they should be. The 13th was looking straight at the boy, or at least the darkness inside his hood was. There was no face. He heard a shuffle somewhere and tore his gaze away from that shadow. The god stood. Seemed awfully close now. There were different sounds now. Crashes and rocks tumbling. Near one house, a huge rock fell from the high valley roll right into the yard, smashing a half-finished table. All around the valley rim there was noise, noise, noise. The gods turned. The boy had passed through all the curse words he knew now, and was inventing several new ones. Quite an achievement for a 6-year-old, but he'd always been an inventive child. He had very few matches left now, and no fire whatsoever. 3 matches left. Flick, strike. 3 matches left now. Flick, strike, flare, out. 2. Flick, strike, flare, out. 1 match. The gods bowed. Last match. Oh gods. Oh gods, oh gods, light. Flick, strike, flare, shit. No more matches. He'd gone through the ones which had been here already, and the spares he brought with him, and there were none left. The noises were reaching a feverish pitch, and there were rocks falling into the valley, trees swaying without wind and falling over even. The god stepped. He cast around for something, anything, any single thing to get this fire lit, but he was running out of time. The gods bowed. There was a noise beside him, and he caught a glimpse of light in the corner of his eye. It was a burning piece of wood. Who? A hand held up the wood. The hand was made of bones. The fire was clearly blackening the bones, but the owner of that bony hand appeared to neither notice nor care. The boy numbly, silently, carefully took the burning wood by the safe end and dropped it into the bowl by the 13th's feet. The fire caught. The oil-soaked wood in the bowl ate it up. He saw fingers of bones pointing. Somewhere over to his right, he looked. The god sat. The noise started to die away as the flames rose, and the god silently watched, but the 13th was still pointing. The boy, the danger over and his hide apparently saved, breathed. The 13th was now pointing with 2 fingers, he noticed. Curiosity overcame his fear for a moment, and he looked right at the fingers, all bony and strange, at which point the fingers poked him in the eyes. His vision blurred with sparks and tears. The boy decided leaving was his wisest course, and started for the stairs down to the village. He seriously broke the rules for however many times that had been tonight, and chanced to look back. The 13th hood faced towards him for a moment, and seemed to nod. Then he turned back to where, before turning back to where it normally looked. He gathered himself and began his careful ascent then. He had broken enough rules for one night. He decided and made sure to count step, being sure to be in time with the gods and their endless rhythm. He heard them shuffle, and the gods stand, turn, bow, step, bow, sit. And he progresses down the next flight. Count, step, step. When the girl ascending crossed him on the steps, she was faintly surprised. Though still very sleepy, and not paying enough attention to ask too many questions, he looked both haunted and frightened, though. Which was odd. He was also smiling, which was even odder. He remembered what he'd seen when the 13th had poked him in the eyes. In the explosion of stars which had filled his vision, he saw inside the shadow and saw the face. It was a skull. It was a face. It was a skull again. It was his face. The gods stand, bow, step, bow, sit, stand, turn, step, bow, sit, stand, turn, bow, step, bow, sit, stand, turn, step, bow, sit. And as you may have imagined, this was inspired by the idea of a giant, enormous clock, and I tried to keep the cadences of clockwork the TikToks and so forth into it, and it's funny. It's just I just had the idea of a great protective clock made up of gods or people, and decided to see what would happen. And so came the 13th Watcher. And the more insightful among you may have a very good idea of not only where the planet that this takes place on is, but where it is, what happened there, and what the noises were, because it does appear elsewhere in this book, but from a different perspective. Excuse me. But anyway, thank you for sharing that with me. I'm going to do one more video and possibly get it ready. But for now, you have a great day, you guys. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed the 13th Watcher. Take care.